Last week we looked at transport in San Francisco. This week we're in Paris, a city that's changing faster and more profoundly than any other European capital. The Seine, with its chugging barges, has long ceased to be the main artery. The city's true pulse rate can now be judged on either bank. Even in the congested streets of the capital, the private automobile is first choice as a means of transport. Well over 2 billion journeys last year in Paris alone, compared with only 1.5 billion in 1965. Journeys by public transport, on the other hand, actually dropped over the same period. There was, of course, a price to be paid: noise, dirt, and an overall increase in urban blight. In a narrow street, one badly tuned engine can deafen the ears and poison air that was none too sweet to begin with. The city dwellers' only defense is to get a flat as high above it all as possible. This is hardly the answer, but whether they like it or not, more and more Parisians will in fact have to live in high-rise blocks. Paris is undergoing a massive redevelopment, and the trend is not just outwards, but upwards. For several years now, the Paris skyline has been dotted with giant cranes. All over the city, new tower blocks have risen, equaling Manhattan in their devotion to straight lines and glass frontages. But these are mainly offices, not homes, attracting workers, not residents. They add to the wealth and, some would say, the glamour of Paris, but for the Parisian, they're just one more reason for leaving. Since 1962, over 250,000 people have moved out of central Paris in search of peace and quiet. A small village, perhaps, with a bit of history and signs to prove it. The ideal spot is not too far, somewhere in the Ile-de-France, for example, the sort of place a Parisian might normally choose for an afternoon outing. And if the picturesque old mill doubles as a restaurant, well, so much the better. Clear streams, green fields, fresh air, the appeal is irresistible. And most valuable of all, perhaps, a sense of calm and continuity. Though the countryside is calm, it's certainly not dead, providing healthy new activities for car-bound city dwellers. Even up to a few years ago, most Parisians would have translated this yearning for the country life into a weekend cottage. Nowadays, funds don't usually stretch that far, and it's a straight choice between the metropolis or the sticks. But the choice is not quite as brutal as it seems, for those who want the country life don't necessarily have to live out of town. This is Val d'Hyères, a new private development which by the time it's finished in 1975 will house some 50,000 people. Val d'Hyères is certainly not unique. There are dozens of similar projects springing up all round Paris, some bigger, some smaller. Their aims are simple and straightforward: to serve as attractive dormitory suburbs, offering those who have to work in Paris the chance of escaping from it during their leisure hours. Although the setting is rural, the architecture doesn't always attempt a village style. The developers are selling not just houses, but a new lifestyle. At Val d'Air, for example, a whole range of open-air activities are catered for on-site, so that residents can ride a horse or take a dip whenever they feel like it. The result is an atmosphere halfway between a residential estate and a holiday camp. As in a holiday camp, there are trained personnel to give advice or simply look after the kids. If Dad hasn't time to give his daughter a swimming lesson, he can leave the job to a professional. Tennis provides sport and social contacts as well. There's even a full-size football field. A stadium is planned for later. It's not just in sport that the estate aims to be self-sufficient. This is one of a number of schools which will eventually provide education from the primary grade to grammar school and technical college level. The new township will be this community centre housed in modernised farm buildings. It'll be both meeting place and arts studio, offering children and parents alike a wide range of courses from sculpture to musical appreciation. Apart from the community's social and educational needs, there are, of course, the more down-to-earth requirements of food, clothing and other supplies. The township has its own shops and supermarkets, and these will be added to as demand increases. About a quarter of the property consists of comparatively low-cost flats for renting only. At the top of the scale are houses like these, which are expensive even by Paris standards. These bungalows, designed by a Finnish architect, cost over £10,000. That means £2,000 deposit and repayments of around £65 a month. The benefits of living in a place like Val d'Air are obvious, but so too are the disadvantages, especially to Parisians who gleefully apply the term pecno, or country bumpkin, to anyone foolish enough to live outside the metropolitan boundaries. The jibe has an element of truth in that French provincial life has not always been renowned for its sophistication or breadth of vision. By escaping from the noise and dirt of the capital, these new-style country dwellers are also escaping from its life and variety. Will Val d'Air be a worthwhile alternative or simply a cosy little place to be bored in? The developer's answer is that whatever its drawbacks or failings, Val d'Air is only 15 miles from the centre of Paris and is therefore able to offer the best of both worlds.
Madame, vous habitiez un appartement à Paris.
The residents themselves are certainly far from disillusioned about their new home. This young housewife moved here from a flat in Paris. Why?
La principale raison est que pour sensiblement le même prix de mensualité,
the main reason was that for approximately the same monthly outlay, they were now buying the property instead of merely renting it. Also, there was more room here. In Paris, it was pretty cramped, and the countryside was, in any case, much better for the children. In Paris, the only walks they had were in town squares.
Et le dimanche, madame, que faites-vous? Ainsi que votre époux, d'ailleurs.
Oui. Eh bien, mon époux qui adore la pêche.
On a Sunday, father went off fishing. It was his favourite sport, and he now had every opportunity for it along the banks of the Yare, which incidentally had also been made into a very pretty country walk. For herself, there was the riding school, very relaxing, but apart from that, they tended to stay on the spot for the children's sake, going for walks perhaps, or out for a meal at the old mill, which was really a very attractive setting.
Nous jouissons d'un cadre formidable. Et avant, lorsque nous étions à Paris, nous étions obligés
In Paris, it had always been a case of getting into the car and doing a dozen miles, perhaps twice that, with traffic jams and all the rest, simply to get some fresh air. The trouble was, all the fresh air they'd breathed was cancelled out by the exhaust fumes. Now they just stayed where they were to get all the fresh air they needed.
Et nous avons cet air qui est si nécessaire à la vie.
A new township doesn't take root easily, but at Val-d'Hier, at least, the population is young enough to be able to grow up along with the community. More than 30% of them are under 15, and no less than 80% are under 40. But though it's growing rapidly, the population's still only 15,000, less than a third of the projected total. So it's too early to talk about success or failure. That judgment will have to come from people like this.